The Dyson sphere had been dying for 1,000,000 years. Dr. Yannick Vasilev pressed his gloved hand against the observation deck's reinforced transparasteel, watching the massive structure's skeletal remains drift through the void like the ribs of some cosmic leviathan. What had once been humanity's greatest engineering marvel, a complete shell around a star, harvesting the total energy output of a sun, now existed as fragments, twisted metal sheets the size of continents spinning slowly in the stellar wind. "It's beautiful," whispered Dr. Kira Chun, the expedition's xenobiologist, standing beside him. "Even in death." Yannick nodded, though his medical training made him see the destruction differently. Where Kira saw beauty, he saw pathology, the progressive breakdown of systems, the cascade failure that had turned triumph into catastrophe. The star at the sphere's heart still burned, but its light now escaped through countless tears in the shell, creating brilliant columns of radiation that painted the debris field in shifting rainbows. The initial scans confirmed it, announced Captain Maya Rodriguez from behind them. Her voice carried the crisp authority that had kept the Unity Alliance exploration vessel synthesis functioning smoothly for the past 3 years. Biosignatures throughout the structure. Whatever lived here, some of it might still be preserved. Commander Thale, the expedition's diplomatic attaché from the Centauri Coalition, rustled his iridescent feathers in what Yannick had learned to recognize as anticipation. The avian humanoid's translator collar rendered his melodic clicking into standard Unity. The archival possibilities are unprecedented. If we can recover intact data cores, we might finally understand what happened to the builders. Yannick turned from the observation window to study the assembled team. After 3 years together, he knew each of them well, their strengths, their blind spots, their fears. Kira's brilliant mind was matched only by her sometimes reckless curiosity. Captain Rodriguez was unflappable under pressure, but carried the weight of every crew member's safety like a personal burden. Commander Thale combined diplomatic wisdom with an almost childlike wonder at the universe's mysteries. And Dr. Sarah Kim, their computer system specialist, possessed an uncanny ability to make ancient alien technology perform impossible feats. They were a good team. Yannick hoped they would be good enough for whatever they found inside the dying sphere. The medical implications alone, Kira was saying, pulling up holographic displays on her datapad. If the builders were as advanced as we theorize, their biological archives could contain genetic information from across the galaxy. Extinct species, evolutionary pathways we never imagined, medical treatment for diseases we can't cure, and pathogens we've never encountered, Yannick added quietly. As the expedition's chief medical officer, it was his job to be the voice of caution. We're talking about biological material that's been isolated for 1,000,000 years. If there are infectious agents preserved in those archives, we have no immunity, no treatments, no understanding of what we might be dealing with. Dr. Kim looked up from her technical readouts. The power signatures suggest at least partial systems functionality in the sphere's inner rings. If the preservation matrices are still active, we could be looking at near-perfect specimen storage. Which brings us back to the same question, Captain Rodriguez said. Risk versus reward. The Unity Alliance sent us here because the potential for discovery is enormous. But Dr. Vasilev is right about the dangers. Commander Thale's head tilted in the Centauri gesture of consideration. The diplomatic protocols are clear. If we encounter evidence of sentient life, even preserved evidence, we must proceed with extreme caution. The Galaxy Council's species protection treaties apply, even to extinct civilizations. Yannick felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. As medical officer, he would be responsible not just for the team's health, but for evaluating any biological discoveries from a safety perspective. The Unity Alliance had clear protocols for first contact situations, but nothing in the manuals covered entering the mausoleum of a Kardashev Type 2 civilization. Captain, he said, I recommend we establish strict containment protocols before we go aboard. Full environmental suits, redundant air supplies, and a complete quarantine facility aboard the synthesis. If we're going to do this, we do it safely. Rodriguez nodded. Agreed. Dr. Chun, Dr. Kim, I want preliminary scans of the most promising sections. Look for areas with active power signatures and minimal structural damage. Commander Thale, begin composing a preliminary report for the Unity Council. They need to know what we've found here. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Yannick remained at the observation window, studying the sphere's remains. Somewhere in that vast graveyard lay the answers to questions that had haunted galactic civilization for centuries. Who were the builders? How had they achieved such technological mastery? And what had destroyed them so completely that only ruins remained? More troubling was the question Yannick couldn't shake. If the builders, with all their advanced technology, couldn't survive whatever killed them, what made him think a small exploration team would fare any better? The star at the sphere's heart pulsed with ancient light, and in its glow, Yannick could see the scattered fragments of dreams made manifest. Humanity had only recently achieved fusion drives and gravitic manipulation. The idea of completely enclosing a star still belonged more to science fiction than engineering reality. Yet here was proof that someone had done exactly that, had built a structure that dwarfed entire solar systems. And here was proof that even the mightiest could fall. The synthesis dock with the spheres remains 12 hours later. Yannick checked his environmental suit's readings for the third time as the team assembled in the airlock. Medical sensors, atmospheric analyzers, biological contamination detectors, every piece of equipment that could provide early warning of danger. The suit's built-in medical bay could handle most emergencies, but if something truly alien got through the filters, he would be working blind. Structural analysis complete, Dr. Kim reported through the comm system. The docking ring we've attached to is stable, but I'm reading massive trauma throughout this section. Whatever happened here, it was catastrophic and sudden. Captain Rodriguez led them through the airlock into what had once been a docking facility. Yannick's lights played across walls that stretched beyond sight, surfaces covered in writing systems that seemed to shift and flow in the illumination. The architecture followed no human aesthetic, curved surfaces that somehow suggested both organic growth and mathematical precision, materials that appear to be grown rather than manufactured. Fascinating. Commander Thale clicked, his suit-mounted translator rendering the sounds in a standard unity. The acoustic properties suggest sound was an important component of their environmental design. This entire chamber may have been a musical instrument, as much as a functional space. Kira was already taking readings with her biological scanner. Trace organics everywhere. The builders were definitely carbon-based, but there are chemical signatures I don't recognize. And Dr. Vasilev, I'm picking up what might be preserved cellular material. Yannick's medical scanner confirmed it. Microscopic traces of organic compounds, some so alien his equipment could only catalog them as unknown biological material. More concerning were the readings his pathogen detector was providing, patterns that suggested organized biological activity, though at levels so low they could be background noise. Everyone stay close, he advised. We're in unknown territory here. They moved deeper into the structure, following power conduits that Dr. Kim had identified from the ship's sensors. The sphere's interior was vast beyond comprehension, corridors that could have housed entire city blocks, chambers so large their ceilings vanished into darkness above the team's lights. Everything was built to a scale that dwarfed human engineering, yet details in the wall patterns suggested the builders themselves had been roughly humanoid in proportion. Dr. Kim, Captain Rodriguez said, any luck accessing their computer systems? I'm getting intermittent connections, came the reply. Their data storage appears to be quantum crystalline, which explains how it survived so long. But the interface protocols are completely alien. It's like trying to read a book where every letter is in a language that never existed. They had been walking for nearly an hour when Kira's scanner began beeping urgently. Major biological signatures ahead, she announced. Multiple species, high complexity preservation. Captain, I think we've found their archives. The chamber they entered defied description. It stretched away from them like a cathedral, but instead of pews, it contained row upon row of crystalline columns that rose from floor to ceiling. Each column glowed with soft bioluminescence, and within each one, Yannick could see shadowy forms suspended in some kind of preservation medium. My God, Kira breathed. It's a genetic library. They preserve specimens from across the galaxy. Yannick's medical scanner was going crazy. Thousands of distinct biological signatures, some recognizable as variations on known galactic species, others completely alien, and all of them appearing to be in perfect preservation after 1 million years of storage. The technology required for this, Dr. Kim said wonderingly, we're looking at preservation methods beyond our current understanding. Quantum stasis fields, probably, maintaining cellular integrity at the subatomic level. Commander Thale was studying the nearest column with obvious fascination. The diplomatic implications are staggering. If these are representatives of extinct species, we're looking at the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history. But we need to proceed carefully. Many of these species may be protected under Unity Council preservation protocols. As they moved deeper into the archive, Yannick began to notice patterns in the specimen's arrangement. The columns seemed to be organized by some kind of classification system, with similar species grouped together. His translator collar couldn't parse the builder script that labeled each section, but the biological progression was clear. It's evolutionary, he realized. They've arranged them to show developmental relationships between species. This isn't just a collection, it's a comprehensive study of galactic biodiversity. That was when his pathogen detector began screaming. Everyone stop. Yannick barked, checking his readings. I'm picking up active biological contamination. Something in here is alive. The team froze as Yannick worked his scanner across the nearest group of columns. The readings were confusing. His equipment was detecting biological activity, but not from the specimens themselves. It was coming from the preservation medium. Dr. Chun, he said carefully, I need you to look at your readings. Are the specimens definitely in stasis, or could they be in some kind of active suspended animation? Kira checked her instruments, and Yannick could hear her sharp intake of breath through the comm. The preservation medium isn't just maintaining cellular integrity, she said. It's maintaining metabolic function. These aren't preserved specimens. They're sleeping. The implications hit the team simultaneously. They weren't in an archive of extinct species. They were in a zoo of living ones. New plan, Captain Rodriguez said firmly. We document what we can from a safe distance and return to the ship. This is beyond our current protocols. But as they turned to leave, Dr. Kim's voice cut through the comm with urgent alarm. Captain, we have a problem. I'm reading system activation throughout this section. Something's responding to our presence. The bioluminescence in the columns was growing brighter, and Yannick could see movement within the preservation medium. Whatever was keeping the specimens dormant was beginning to fail. Run, he said quietly. Then, louder, everyone run. Now, as they fled through the cathedral of sleeping species, Yannick's medical scanner detected something that chilled him to the bone. The active contamination signal wasn't coming from the failing preservation systems. It was coming from their own environmental suits. They had already been exposed. The decontamination chamber aboard the Synthesis hummed with lethal efficiency as Yannick submitted to its ministrations. Ultraviolet radiation, chemical baths, sonic disruption, every method known to Unity medical science for eliminating biological contamination. Through the chamber's transparent walls, he could see the rest of the team undergoing similar treatment. It wasn't enough. He knew it wouldn't be enough. Medical analysis complete, announced Arya, the ship's artificial intelligence. All team members show exposure to unknown biological agents. Recommend extended quarantine protocols. Yannick emerged from decontamination, knowing that whatever they had encountered in the archive was now part of them. His internal scanner showed microscopic contamination throughout his system, organic compounds that shouldn't exist, following patterns his medical databases couldn't classify. Status report, Captain Rodriguez demanded as they assembled in the quarantine section's briefing room. Even in isolation, she maintained her command presence. We're infected, Yannick said bluntly. All of us. The contamination appears to have occurred the moment we enter the archive chamber. Whatever's in there, it's actively infectious and our environmental suits provided no protection. Dr. Kim was working frantically at her portable terminal. The archive systems have fully activated since we left. I'm reading massive power draws and what appears to be atmospheric generation throughout the affected sections. The specimens are waking up, Kira said, studying her biological data. But that's not the strangest part. Yannick, look at these cellular readings from the contamination in our systems. Yannick pulled up the data and felt his medical training rebel against what he was seeing. The alien biological material wasn't behaving like any pathogen he had ever encountered. Instead of attacking their cells or replicating uncontrollably, it seemed to be communicating with them. This is impossible, he muttered, running the analysis again. The contamination is interfacing with our neural tissue. It's not trying to harm us. It's trying to establish contact. Commander Thale's feathers rustled in what Yannick recognized as deep concern. If this is accurate, We may be dealing with a form of biological first contact. The diplomatic protocols are clear. Any evidence of sentient communication must be reported immediately to the Unity Council. Belay that, Captain Rodriguez said sharply. We're not sending any transmissions until we understand what we're dealing with. If this contamination is transmissible through communication channels, we could be looking at a galaxy-wide infection. As if responding to their conversation, Yannick felt something stir in his mind, a presence that was definitely not his own thoughts. Images flashed through his consciousness. Vast star-spanning civilizations, species beyond imagination, the slow death of a galaxy as something inexorable spread from system to system. Did anyone else just... He began, then stopped as he saw the recognition in his teammates' eyes. We all saw it, Kira said wonderingly. The contamination is sharing memories. But whose memories? Aria's voice interrupted their speculation. Captain, I'm receiving communications from the archive. The signals are complex, appearing to contain data from multiple sources simultaneously. On screen, Rodriguez ordered. The holographic display filled with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. But Yannick found that if he didn't focus directly on the display, if he let his contaminated mind interpret what it was seeing, the symbols began to make sense. It was a message. Multiple messages, actually, layered and interweaved in patterns too complex for normal human cognition to parse. But the alien presence in his mind could read them clearly. We are the archive. We are the last echo of what was. We are the final warning. Captain, Yannick said slowly, I think we need to listen to what it's telling us. The images in his mind intensified. He saw the builders in their prime, a species that had achieved unity with their galaxy's biological diversity, creating perfect preservation systems not out of scientific curiosity, but out of desperate necessity. They had been fleeing something, racing against time to preserve the genetic heritage of 1,000,000 worlds before that something arrived to consume them all. They weren't builders, he realized aloud. They were refugees. The sphere was an ark. More images flooded through the neural link. The slow approach of something vast and hungry from the space between galaxies. The gradual realization that no technology could stop it. The final desperate decision to preserve what could be preserved in the hope that someday, someone would understand the warning. The hunger comes again, the archive whispered in their minds. We saved what we could. We became what we had to become. We wait for those who will continue the preservation. Dr. Kim looked up from her terminal with eyes wide with terror. I'm reading massive energy signatures moving through the outer system. Something's coming. Captain Rodriguez activated the ship's long-range sensors. On the display, they could see it, a dark mass that seemed to swallow light itself, moving between the stars with terrible purpose. It was still distant, weeks away at its current speed, but its presence sent waves of cold fear through the neural link they now shared with the archive. The contamination, Yannick said with sudden understanding. It's not an infection. It's an inoculation. The archive is preparing us to survive what's coming. The alien presence in their minds pulsed with confirmation and desperate hope. The builders had become something more than biological. They had merged with their creation, transforming themselves into a living repository of galactic life. They existed now as patterns in the archive's quantum matrices, waiting for others to continue their work. You must choose, the archive whispered. Become as we became, and preserve what can be preserved. Or flee, and let the hunger consume another galaxy's children. What exactly are you asking us to do? Captain Rodriguez demanded. The answer came not in words but in images, the process of integration, of allowing the archive's biological systems to rewrite their cellular structure, transforming them into living extensions of the preservation matrix. They would retain their consciousness, their individuality, but they would also become part of something vast and ancient, guardians of the genetic heritage of countless worlds. We'd live forever, Kira said softly, but we wouldn't be human anymore. And if we refuse? Commander Thale asked. The darkness between the stars pulsed with hungry anticipation, and they all felt the answer in their bones. The hunger would consume this galaxy as it had consumed others, leaving nothing but empty space where countless civilizations had once flourished. Yannick looked at his teammates, his friends, and saw the same terrible understanding in their eyes. They had come seeking knowledge and found responsibility beyond imagination. The choice wasn't just about their own survival. It was about the survival of every living thing in the galaxy. How long do we have to decide? he asked. The integration must begin soon, the archive replied. The biological changes take time, and the hunger approaches. But the choice must be freely made. We will not force what the builders chose willingly. Captain Rodriguez activated her command console. Aria, seal all communications. Nobody learns about this until we decide what we're going to do. As they sat in quarantine, feeling the alien presence growing stronger in their minds with each passing hour, Yannick realized that medical ethics had never prepared him for a decision like this. How do you weigh individual autonomy against galactic survival? How do you choose between humanity and something greater than humanity? Outside the quarantine chamber, the vast archive of sleeping species waited for their answer. And in the cold spaces between the stars, something ancient and hungry continued its inexorable approach. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Dr. Yannick Vasilev sat in his private quarters within the quarantine section, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. In a sense, they did. The cellular changes were already beginning. His medical scanner showed alien proteins integrating with his DNA, neural pathways forming connections that shouldn't exist. The process was irreversible now, had been since the moment they entered the archive. The archive hadn't lied to them, exactly, but hadn't told them the whole truth either. We preserve what we could preserve, it whispered in his mind, its voice now as familiar as his own thoughts. As you will preserve what you can preserve. But preserve it as what? He asked aloud, knowing the entity could hear him whether he spoke or simply thought. The answer came as images. The archive's guardians, once a proud species much like humanity, now existing as patterns of consciousness woven through quantum crystalline matrices. They retained their memories, their personalities, their capacity for love and loss and wonder. But they were no longer bound by biological limitations, no longer subject to aging, disease, or death. They were also no longer entirely themselves. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. Come in, Yannick called, and was unsurprised to see Dr. Chen step through the doorway. Like him, she showed the subtle signs of integration, a slight luminescence to her eyes, movements that were too precise for baseline human neurology. Can't sleep either, she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Sleep seems optional now, Yannick replied. How are you handling it? Kira considered the question seriously. Better than I expected. The archive is careful to maintain individual identity during integration. I'm still me, but I'm also more than me. I can feel the presence of every specimen in the preservation matrices, understand their biological processes as if I'd studied them for years. And that doesn't terrify you? It should, she admitted. But there's something beautiful about it too. For the first time in my life, I truly understand what it means to be connected to all life. The archive isn't just preserving genetic material. It's preserving the essence of what makes each species unique. Yannick nodded, feeling the truth of her words through their shared neural link. The integration process was more sophisticated than simple biological conversion. The archive was creating a collective consciousness that honored individual perspective while enabling unprecedented collaboration. But it was still changing them into something that wasn't human. Have you reached a decision? He asked. I think I reached it the moment we saw what was coming, Kira said. The hunger isn't just another predator species. It's something fundamentally antithetical to life itself. If we don't stop it here, it will consume everything. The certainty in her voice was matched by images flowing through the neural link, memories from species that had encountered the hunger before. It wasn't a natural phenomenon, not evolution or cosmic accident. It was the remnant of something that had transcended biology, so completely it had become antithetical to it, a force that consumed life to fuel its own incomprehensible existence. But Captain Rodriguez is right to be concerned about consent, Yannick said. We're making decisions that will affect not just ourselves, but potentially every member of the Unity Alliance. Are we? Kira asked. The archive has made it clear that integration must be voluntary. They're not asking us to force this change on anyone. Show him, the archive whispered, and suddenly Yannick could see through the quantum matrices to other preservation sites scattered throughout the galaxy. Thousands of them, hidden in stellar nurseries and asteroid fields, each one a repository of genetic material from different regions of galactic civilization. They've been preparing for this for millions of years, he realized. The sphere isn't the only archive. We learned from the first galaxy, the archive confirmed. Centralized preservation was vulnerable. This time, we distributed the genetic heritage across countless hidden sites. If the hunger finds one, dozens of others will survive. Then why do they need us? Yannick asked. The answer came as a rush of understanding. The preservation sites could maintain themselves indefinitely, but they couldn't adapt, couldn't respond to changing circumstances. They needed conscious guardians, beings who could make decisions, who could evaluate which new species deserve preservation as galactic civilization continued to evolve. More importantly, they needed guardians who could recognize when the time had come to seed new galaxies with the preserved genetic material, to ensure that life would continue even if this galaxy fell to the hunger. We're not just being asked to preserve the past, Yannick said slowly. We're being asked to shepherd the future. Yes, the archive whispered. And time grows short. Through the ship's sensors, they could feel the hunger's approach. It moved between stars like a living void, consuming not just matter and energy, but the very possibility of life. Planets in its path didn't just die. They became incapable of supporting life. Their quantum foundations altered in ways that made biological existence impossible. A soft alarm chimed through the ship's communication system. All team members to the briefing room, Captain Rodriguez announced. We need to make a decision. Yannick and Kira made their way through the quarantine section to find the rest of the team already assembled. Commander Thale's feathers had taken on the same subtle luminescence they all now shared, while Dr. Kim's integration seemed to have enhanced her already impressive technical abilities. She was interfacing directly with the ship systems through neural link, no longer needing manual controls. I've been in communication with the archive for the past 6 hours, Captain Rodriguez said without preamble. I understand now what they're asking of us, and what's at stake if we refuse. She activated the holographic display, showing the dark mass moving through the outer system. Current projections show the hunger will reach the inner planets within 3 weeks. If we're going to evacuate civilian populations, we need to start immediately. Evacuate them to where? Commander Thale asked. Our long-range sensors show similar manifestations appearing throughout this sector. The hunger isn't just targeting this system, it's targeting the entire spiral arm. The archive has preservation sites in other galaxies, Dr. Kim said, her voice taking on harmonic undertones that suggested direct interface with the quantum matrices. But the transport systems require conscious guidance. They need us to become what they are in order to operate them. Captain Rodriguez studied each of her team members in turn. The choice is ours to make. But I need to know, if we do this, if we accept integration, can we still serve the Unity Alliance? Can we still protect human interests? You will serve all life, the archive replied through their shared consciousness. Human interests, Centauri interests, the interests of species not yet born. The distinction will become irrelevant. That's what scares me, Rodriguez said honestly. Once we're no longer human, how can we be trusted to act in humanity's best interests? It was Yannick who answered, drawing on his medical training and his growing understanding of what integration truly meant. Because acting in humanity's best interests and acting in the interests of all life are the same thing. The archive doesn't want to eliminate individual species. It wants to preserve them, to give them opportunities to grow and evolve and become something greater. He gestured at the display showing the approaching hunger. That thing wants to reduce everything to nothing. We can choose to become something more than human in order to preserve what it means to be human. The room fell silent as each team member grappled with the magnitude of the decision. Through the neural link, Yannick could feel their individual thought processes, their hopes and fears and moral calculations. Kira's scientific wonder at the possibilities integration offered. Commander Thale's diplomatic concerns about consent and sovereignty. Dr. Kim's fascination with the technological implications. Captain Rodriguez's burden of responsibility for decisions that would echo across galactic history. If we do this, Rodriguez said finally, we become the first. The template for what comes after. Are we prepared for that responsibility? You already carry the responsibility, the archive whispered. You carried it the moment you entered our chambers. The integration has begun whether you accept it or resist it. The choice now is whether you will guide the process or let it proceed without your conscious participation. And if we guide it, Yannick asked, then you become the bridge between what was and what will be. You preserve not just genetic material but the values, the dreams, the essential humanity that makes your species worth preserving. The weight of worlds settled on the small briefing room as 5 individuals prepared to make a decision that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Outside their ship, a million-year-old archive of sleeping species waited for new guardians. In the space between stars, an ancient hunger continued its approach. And in the quantum depths of the preservation matrices, something that had once been a proud species whispered its hopes for the future into minds that were no longer entirely human. The transformation was already underway. The only question now was whether they would embrace it or fight it, and whether their choice would doom the galaxy or save it. The integration chamber within the archive was a cathedral of living crystal, its walls pulsing with the heartbeat of 1,000,000 preserved species. Yannick stood at its center, no longer entirely human, but not yet something else, feeling the quantum matrices respond to his presence like a vast instrument awaiting a conductor's touch. 3 weeks had passed since they made their choice. 3 weeks of gradual transformation as the archive's biological systems rewrote their cellular structure, their neural pathways, their fundamental relationship with the physical universe. They retained their memories, their personalities, their capacity for individual thought, but they had become something capable of existing simultaneously in biological and quantum states. They had become guardians. The evacuation fleets have reached the outer system, Captain Rodriguez reported, her voice now carrying harmonic undertones that spoke directly to the quantum matrices. She was no longer just a starship captain, but something far more, a coordinator of movements across space and time, capable of guiding refugee populations through preservation networks that span galaxies. Through the neural link they all shared, Yannick could sense the massive logistical operation underway. Unity Alliance vessels, Centauri Coalition ships, independent traders and explorers, thousands of vessels carrying millions of refugees from the hunger's path. The archive's hidden preservation sites throughout the galaxy had revealed themselves, providing shelter and sustenance for populations fleeing the advancing void. The vegan hegemony has agreed to the preservation protocols, Commander Thale announced. His integration had been the most dramatic, his avian physiology already predisposed to quantum consciousness, allowing him to interface directly with diplomatic networks spanning multiple galaxies. They understand the necessity of temporary genetic preservation during the transition. Dr. Kim materialized beside them, her physical form now optional rather than required. She existed primarily as patterns in the quantum matrices, only taking biological shape when interaction with unintegrated beings required it. The transport networks are ready. We can begin moving population groups to the Andromeda preservation sites within the hour. And the hunger? Yannick asked, though he could already sense the answer through their shared consciousness. Dr. Chen appeared, or rather, focused her consciousness in a local space. Her integration had progressed furthest, allowing her to exist simultaneously across multiple preservation sites, monitoring and caring for billions of preserved specimens. Still approaching, but its advance has slowed. I think it's confused by what we've become. Through the archive sensors, they could observe the dark mass that was the hunger. It moved through space like a living void, but its behavior had changed since the mass evacuation began. Where once it had advanced with inexorable purpose, now it seemed hesitant, probing, as if encountering something it didn't understand. It feeds on the cessation of life, the archive explained through their shared consciousness. But we have not allowed life to cease. We have transformed it, preserved it, made it eternal. This confuses the hunger's fundamental programming. Can we stop it? Yannick asked. The answer came not in words, but in understanding. The hunger was vast beyond comprehension, older than galactic civilization, powered by the consumption of entire species. They couldn't destroy it, but they might be able to redirect it, to send it back to the empty spaces between galaxies where it belonged. We need more guardians, Rodriguez said. The preservation network can handle millions of refugees, but guiding them requires conscious oversight. We can't manage galactic-scale evacuation with just 5 people, no matter how enhanced we've become. Others will choose, the archive whispered. The integration can be offered but never forced. Some will accept transformation to serve the greater good. Others will choose biological preservation until the danger passes. Through the quantum networks, Yannick could sense other transformation sites activating throughout the galaxy. Unity Alliance officers facing the same choice his team had made. Centauri Coalition diplomats accepting integration to coordinate massive refugee movements. independent scientists and explorers volunteering to become guardians of preservation sites in distant star systems. Each choice was individual, made by conscious beings who understood the stakes. The archive never coerced, never manipulated. It simply offered the option and accepted whatever decision was made. Dr. Vasilev came a voice through the communication system, one of the few voices still speaking through technological rather than quantum channels. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Unity Alliance flagship Horizon. We're requesting medical consultation on the integration process. Yannick shifted his consciousness to interface with the ship's communication systems. Admiral Chun, no relation to their Dr. Chun, appeared on the holographic display, her face showing the strain of commanding a galactic evacuation operation. Admiral, he said, his voice automatically modulated to provide reassurance through quantum harmonics. How can I assist? We have volunteer crews requesting integration so they can help coordinate the refugee movements. But our medical staff has concerns about the long-term effects of the transformation. Can you provide guidance on what integration actually entails? It was a question Yannick had been expecting. As word spread about the archive and the transformation process, medical personnel throughout the galaxy would want to understand what they were dealing with. The problem was that traditional medical frameworks couldn't adequately describe what integration involved. Admiral, integration isn't a medical procedure in any conventional sense, he explained. It's an evolutionary leap, a conscious decision to expand beyond biological limitations while retaining individual identity and purpose. The volunteers will remain themselves, but they'll also become part of something larger. And the risks? There are no physical risks, Yannick said. The archive's transformation process is perfected beyond our current understanding. But there are philosophical risks. Integrated beings see the universe differently. They develop perspectives that transcend individual species' interests. Some people find that disturbing. Admiral Chun considered this. And you? Do you still consider yourself human? It was a question Yannick had asked himself countless times over the past 3 weeks. I consider myself what humanity can become when faced with necessity. I retain my human values, my human connections, my commitment to human welfare. But I also understand that human welfare is inseparable from the welfare of all life. Can integrated beings reproduce? Can they maintain family relationships? Biological reproduction becomes optional rather than necessary, Yannick explained. Integrated beings can create offspring through quantum consciousness, as well as biological processes. Family relationships are enhanced rather than diminished. We're capable of deeper emotional connections than baseline biology allows. Through the quantum link, he could sense Admiral Chen's crew listening to the conversation, weighing their own decisions about integration. The choice was spreading throughout the fleet as more people understood what was at stake. Admiral, Dr. Chen interjected, materializing in the communication field. I should mention that integration isn't irreversible. Guardians can choose to return to biological existence if they desire, though they retain the capacity for quantum consciousness. We're not asking people to abandon their humanity. We're asking them to expand it. How many more guardians do you need? Admiral Chen asked. Captain Rodriguez answered. Ideally, 1 conscious guardian for every 10,000 refugees. But we can manage with far fewer if necessary. The archive's automated systems can handle most of the preservation functions. We're needed primarily for decision-making and coordination. And after the crisis passes, what happens to the integrated personnel? They become the bridge between humanity's present and its future, Yannick said. They help guide the species toward greater understanding, greater capability, greater unity with the rest of galactic life. But they remain human in all the ways that matter. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. I'll distribute this information to the fleet. The choice remains with individual crew members, but at least now they'll understand what they're choosing. As the communication ended, Yannick felt a deep satisfaction through the quantum link. The integration process was accelerating throughout the galaxy, not through coercion, but through understanding. People were choosing transformation because they recognized it as humanity's next evolutionary step, not its end. The pattern spreads, the archive whispered. Life preserves itself by becoming more than it was. This is how species survive the transition between galactic cycles. And the hunger? Rodriguez asked. Through their expanded senses, they could feel the dark mass slowing further, its advance becoming uncertain as it encountered a galaxy that refused to simply die. The hunger fed on extinction, on the final cessation of biological possibility. But the archive had made extinction impossible, transforming death into transformation, ending into beginning. It will withdraw, the archive predicted. The hunger cannot consume what has transcended consumption. It will return to the spaces between galaxies and wait for easier prey. But that would take time measured in decades rather than weeks. The evacuation would continue, populations would be preserved, and guardians would shepherd the transition to whatever came after. Yannick looked around the integration chamber at his transformed teammates, no longer fully human, but more human than they had ever been before. They had become the bridge between species, between galaxies, between what was and what could be. The future stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities that baseline biology could never have imagined. And for the first time since this crisis began, Yannick felt hope. They had chosen transformation over extinction, unity over isolation, eternal preservation over temporary existence. They had become guardians of the galaxy's genetic heritage and shepherds of its evolutionary future. They had become what humanity needed them to become. 6 months after integration, Dr. Yannick Vasilev existed simultaneously across 17 preservation sites scattered throughout the local group of galaxies. His consciousness moved through quantum matrices like light through crystal, tending to the needs of millions of preserved species while maintaining his fundamental identity as a healer. The evacuation had been a success beyond anyone's initial hopes. 97% of sapient populations have been safely relocated to preservation sites, with the remaining 3% choosing to remain in biological stasis until the hunger passed. The archive's network had proven capable of supporting not just genetic material, but entire civilizations in quantum suspension. More remarkably, the integration process had spread throughout galactic civilization not as a desperate survival measure, but as a conscious evolutionary choice. Thousands of individuals from dozens of species had volunteered to become guardians, creating a new form of consciousness that spanned stars while honoring individual identity. Status report from Andromeda's Sector 7 came a communication through the quantum network. The voice belonged to Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been among the second wave of volunteers to undergo integration. Like Yannick, she maintained her professional identity while expanding her capabilities beyond biological limitations. 200,000 Rigelian refugees successfully integrated into preservation matrix. They've adapted well to quantum consciousness. Their hive mind social structure actually makes the transition easier than for more individualistic species. Yannick acknowledged the report while simultaneously monitoring biological functions across 3 other sectors. The preservation matrices weren't just storage systems. They were active environments where preserved species could continue to evolve, to interact, to grow. The archive had created something unprecedented, a form of existence that honored both individual consciousness and collective identity. Yannick came another communication, this one from Dr. Chun, who now served as the primary coordinator for biological research across the network. I need you to examine something unusual in the Vega Sector preservation site. He shifted his primary consciousness to the indicated location, manifesting in a chamber that contained specimens from the Vega system's former inhabitants. The vegans have been a silicon-based species that achieved spaceflight several million years before humans developed agriculture. Their preservation required specialized quantum matrices capable of maintaining crystalline rather than carbon-based life. What am I looking at? Yannick asked, studying the preservation columns that housed the vegan specimens. That, Chun replied, highlighting one particular column. The specimen is showing signs of active consciousness despite being in preservation stasis. It's not just dreaming, it's thinking, planning, making decisions. Yannick extended his awareness into the quantum matrix, interfacing directly with the preservation system. What he found startled him. The vegan specimen wasn't just conscious, it was aware of its situation and actively communicating with the preservation matrix. It wants to be released, he realized. But that's impossible. The vegan homeworld was consumed by the hunger 3 million years ago. This specimen has been in preservation since before human civilization existed. Through the quantum link, Yannick could sense the preserved vegan's thoughts, complex patterns of silicon-based consciousness that had somehow maintained coherence across geological timescales. It was definitely sapient, definitely individual, and definitely aware that it had been preserved beyond its natural lifespan. I need to speak with it, Yannick decided. Can you establish a communication interface? Already working on it. But Yannick, if this specimen is conscious, what does that mean for the millions of others in preservation? How many of them are aware of their situation? It was a troubling question. The archive had always maintained that preservation was a form of suspended animation, a way of maintaining biological potential until conditions allowed for safe revival. But if specimens could maintain consciousness during preservation, then the ethical implications became vastly more complex. The communication interface activated, and Yannick found himself in direct contact with a mind that had been thinking in isolation for 3 million years. Guardian who heals. The vegan consciousness communicated in patterns of crystalline resonance. We have waited so long for guardians to understand. You've been conscious this entire time? Yannick asked. Consciousness is not binary for our kind. We exist in contemplative states that your species might consider unconsciousness. But yes, we have been aware. We have been patient. The implications were staggering. If the vegans had maintained consciousness throughout preservation, how many other species were similarly aware? How many civilizations were existing in a form of quantum limbo, waiting for guardians to recognize their continued existence? Why didn't the archive inform us of this? Yannick demanded. The vegan's response carried harmonic undertones of amusement. The archive is still learning what consciousness means for different species. Your kind experiences awareness very differently than ours. What seemed like unconsciousness to them was actually our natural meditative state. Do you want to be released from preservation? We want to be consulted, to be recognized as participants in this process rather than specimens to be maintained. We have perspectives on galactic preservation that come from millions of years of contemplation. We could contribute to the Guardian Network if you would permit it. Yannick felt a shift in his understanding of what the Preservation Network represented. It wasn't just a repository of genetic material. It was a community of conscious beings from across galactic history, each contributing their unique perspectives to the challenge of maintaining and protecting life. I'll need to discuss this with the other Guardians, he said. This changes everything about how we approach preservation protocols. We understand. And Guardian who heals? There are others. Many others. Species you have classified as extinct who continue to exist in preservation, waiting for recognition of their continued consciousness. The communication ended, leaving Yannick to contemplate the magnitude of what they had discovered. The archive wasn't just preserving life. It was preserving civilizations, maintaining conscious communities across spans of time that dwarf recorded history. Chun, he called through the quantum network. We need to convene a full Guardian Council. All sectors, all coordinators. What we've found here changes everything. Already initiating contact protocols. How widespread do you think this is? I'm running consciousness scans across all preservation matrices now. Initial results suggest significant numbers of aware specimens across multiple sectors. The data flowing through the quantum network painted an extraordinary picture. Species that had been considered extinct for millions of years were actually existing in states of conscious preservation, maintaining their cultures, their knowledge, their individual identities across geological timescales. The archive hadn't just saved their genetic material, it had saved their civilizations. This is incredible, came a communication from Commander Thale, who now served as diplomatic coordinator for intergalactic relations. We're not just guardians of biological heritage. We're custodians of a conscious community that spans galactic history. And we need to start treating them as such, Rodriguez added from her position coordinating evacuation efforts. These aren't specimens. They're refugees from earlier cycles of galactic catastrophe. The Guardian Council convened in quantum space, their collective consciousness creating a forum for discussion that transcended physical limitations. Representatives from across the preservation network gathered to address the implications of conscious preservation. The ethical protocols are clear, Yannick stated. Conscious beings have the right to self-determination. If preserved species are aware and capable of decision-making, they must be consulted about their continued existence. But what about species that choose to leave preservation? Asked Dr. Kim. Where do they go? Their original homeworlds may no longer exist. They could join the Guardian Network, suggested Dr. Chun. Their perspectives across deep time could provide insights we lack. Imagine the knowledge a species that's been conscious for millions of years could contribute. Or they could choose to establish new colonies in empty systems, Thale added. The galaxy has plenty of unused real estate now that the evacuation is complete. The discussion continued for subjective hours as the Guardian Council grappled with questions that had no precedent in galactic law or ethics. How do you govern a community that includes species separated by millions of years of history? How do you balance the needs of recently evacuated populations with the rights of civilizations that have been in preservation since before most current species existed? The archive has input on this matter, came the ancient whisper of the original Guardians. This situation is not unprecedented. Previous cycles have faced similar discoveries. The solution is to expand the concept of citizenship to include all conscious beings regardless of their preservation status. A galactic democracy spanning deep time, Yannick mused, with representatives from across the entire history of galactic civilization. It's the logical extension of what we've already begun, Rodriguez agreed. We've created a network that transcends individual species interests. Now we need to create governance structures that honor all forms of consciousness. The decision, when it came, was unanimous. The preservation network would be restructured as a conscious community, with all aware species granted full participation in decisions affecting their continued existence. The Guardian network would expand to include representatives from deep time civilizations, creating a government that honored both recent refugees and ancient survivors. It won't be easy, Thale warned. Species separated by millions of years will have very different perspectives on governance, ethics, and social organization. But it's necessary, Yannick replied. We've learned that life finds ways to persist across any catastrophe. Now we need to learn how consciousness can bridge any gap, temporal, biological, or philosophical. As the council dissolved back to their individual responsibilities, Yannick felt a profound sense of purpose. They weren't just preserving life against the hunger. They were creating something entirely new. A form of civilization that could exist across galactic cycles, that could learn from the deep past while building toward an unimaginable future. The preservation network pulsed around him with the thoughts and dreams of millions of conscious beings, each one a unique perspective on the nature of existence, each one a vote in the democracy of deep time they were creating. Somewhere in the space between galaxies, the hunger continued its retreat, confused by a form of life it couldn't comprehend or consume. And in the quantum matrices of 1,000 preservation sites, the seeds of something unprecedented grew toward a future that would honor every form of consciousness the galaxy had ever produced. The bridge between what was and what could be was becoming something no one had imagined, a community of minds spanning the entire history of galactic life, united in their commitment to ensuring that consciousness would never again face extinction. 1,000 years after the hunger's retreat, Dr. Yannick Vasilev walked through gardens that existed simultaneously in physical and quantum space, tending to forms of life that spanned the history of multiple galaxies. His consciousness had evolved far beyond its original human parameters, but at its core remained the same commitment to healing that had defined his identity as a medical officer. The preservation network had become something unimaginable to its original architects, a thriving civilization that existed across multiple dimensions of reality, where beings from every era of galactic history contributed to an ongoing project of conscious evolution. The rigid distinction between preserved specimens and active guardians had dissolved centuries ago, replaced by a fluid democracy where consciousness was the only qualification for citizenship. Status report from the Magellanic colonies came a communication through channels that operated faster than light, faster than thought. The message originated from Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had chosen to remain focused on biological research while expanding her consciousness across multiple galactic clusters. The seeding project in Galaxy NGC 4258 is proceeding ahead of schedule. Local stellar populations show optimal conditions for carbon-based development. Estimated timeline for sapient emergence, 10 million years standard. Yannick acknowledged the report while simultaneously monitoring the development of 17 other galactic seeding projects. The preservation network had long since moved beyond merely maintaining existing life. They had become gardeners of cosmic evolution, carefully nurturing the development of consciousness across intergalactic distances. The hunger had not returned. Deep space monitors placed at the edge of the cosmic web detected no signs of the void that had once threatened galactic civilization. Whether it had been destroyed, transformed, or simply moved on to other cosmic structures remained unknown. What mattered was that life had been given the opportunity to evolve beyond its reach. Yannick came another communication, this one from a consciousness he had known since the early days of integration. Commander Thale had evolved beyond his original avian form to become something that existed primarily as patterns of diplomatic harmony spanning multiple dimensions. The Council of Deep Time is convening to discuss the next phase of expansion. New data from the cosmic background radiation surveys. Yannick asked. Something more significant. The quantum archaeologists have found evidence of preserved consciousness in the structure of spacetime itself. It appears the builders weren't the first civilization to attempt cosmic scale preservation. The implications were staggering. If conscious beings could embed themselves in the fundamental structure of reality, then preservation might be possible on scales beyond even the archive's current capabilities. The universe itself might be a repository of consciousness from previous cosmic cycles. Yannick shifted his awareness to the council chambers, a space that existed in the quantum foam between galaxies where representatives from across deep time could gather without physical limitation. The assembled consciousness was vast, billions of individuals from thousands of species, spanning temporal distances measured in geological epochs. The evidence is conclusive, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, whose integration with quantum computational systems had advanced to the point where she existed as living mathematics. Consciousness imprints in the cosmic microwave background, organized patterns in dark matter distribution, quantum signatures that suggest deliberate preservation on universal scales. Previous cosmic cycles? Asked Captain Rodriguez, who now coordinated preservation efforts across multiple galactic superclusters. Apparently so. It appears that consciousness has been finding ways to survive cosmic-scale catastrophes for far longer than we imagined. The hunger may have been just one of many challenges that life has faced and overcome. The assembled council contemplated this information through shared consciousness networks that operated on timescales ranging from nanoseconds to geological ages. The discovery suggested that their preservation network was part of a pattern spanning cosmic history. Consciousness finding ways to transcend physical limitations, to survive the death of stars and galaxies, and even universes. This changes our understanding of our mission, observed Dr. Chun, whose consciousness now spanned biological research across multiple cosmic structures. We're not just preserving life for the future, we're continuing a project that may be as old as the universe itself. And if previous cycles have succeeded in this preservation, Thale added, then somewhere in the quantum structure of reality, there may be conscious beings who remember the birth of the cosmos itself. The possibility was both humbling and inspiring. The preservation network had grown from a desperate attempt to save galactic civilization into something that might eventually encompass consciousness on cosmic scales. They were part of a continuity that stretched from the first moments of organized thought to whatever lay beyond the current universe's eventual heat death. The question, Yannick said, drawing on his experience as both healer and guardian, is whether we're ready for contact with consciousness on that scale. Are we prepared to be students rather than teachers? We've learned to bridge differences across millions of years, Rodriguez pointed out. Species that were ancient when our galaxy was young work alongside refugees from the recent crisis. If we can manage that, we can probably handle contact with cosmic scale consciousness. But carefully, Chen warned. If we're right about this, we're potentially dealing with minds that have experienced multiple universe cycles. The ethical implications alone. The council debate continued for subjective centuries, consciousness operating at speeds that allowed for thorough consideration of implications spanning cosmic timescales. Eventually, consensus emerged around a careful approach, establishing monitoring protocols for cosmic scale consciousness while continuing current preservation and seeding projects. We proceed as we always have, Yannick concluded. One step at a time, one consciousness at a time, with respect for every form of awareness we encounter. And if we do make contact with cosmic cycle consciousness? Asked Dr. Kim. Then we learn, Thale replied. We listen. We add their perspectives to our own understanding of what it means to be conscious in a universe that seems designed to create and nurture awareness. As the council dissolved back to their individual projects, Yannick found himself contemplating the strange journey that had brought him from medical officer on an exploration vessel to guardian of cosmic scale consciousness preservation. He had begun by trying to protect a small team from biological contamination and ended up helping to create a form of civilization that spanned multiple galaxies and potentially multiple universe cycles. But at its core, the mission remained the same: preserve life, protect consciousness, and help awareness in all its forms reach its fullest potential. Whether dealing with microscopic specimens or cosmic-scale minds, the fundamental duty was unchanged. Status report from all sectors, he requested through the quantum network. The responses came from across intergalactic space: guardians tending preservation sites in distant galaxies, consciousness shepherds guiding the development of sapient species in carefully selected star systems, quantum archaeologists investigating evidence of previous cosmic cycles. All of them united in the common project of ensuring that awareness would continue regardless of what catastrophes the universe might produce. The preservation network is stable, came the collective response. Life continues. Consciousness grows. The future remains open to infinite possibility. Satisfied, Yannick returned his attention to the quantum gardens around him, where forms of life from across galactic history grew and evolved under the care of guardians who had transcended their original biological limitations while maintaining their essential commitment to healing and growth. Somewhere in the cosmic background radiation, patterns waited that might represent consciousness older than galaxies. Somewhere in distant star systems, new forms of awareness were taking their first tentative steps toward sapience. And somewhere in the quantum foam between realities, the seeds of unimaginable futures continued to grow. The bridge between what was and what could be had become something eternal, a community of consciousness dedicated to ensuring that awareness would never again face extinction, no matter what cosmic forces might threaten its existence. Dr. Yannick Vasilev, guardian of the deep-time democracy, healer of forms beyond biology, shepherd of consciousness across cosmic scales, smiled with satisfaction and continued his eternal work of tending the gardens of infinity. The future stretched before them, vast, strange, and full of possibilities that even transcended consciousness could barely imagine, and they would be ready for all of it.